On the night of March 7th, 1965, people up and down the East Coast sat captivated in front of their black and white television sets. Bostonians, New Yorkers, in Atlanta, people watched actor Spencer Tracy play Judge Haywood in the network premiere of Judgment of Nuremberg. In this 1961 Academy Award-winning motion picture, Tracy's character is trying to figure out something. Judge Haywood is trying to figure out how so many Germans could either ignore or remain silent concerning the crimes of the Nazi regime. Tracy's character is trying to figure out how everyday German people, folks who were neither fanatics nor sociopaths, could follow Hitler down such a despicable drain of death and human destruction. And Tracy's character, this Judge Haywood, was trying to wrap his mind around what Hannah Arendt would ultimately refer to as the banality of evil. Injustice fueled not by a particular ideology as much as by an uncritical acceptance and indifference to human suffering. This is why Tracy asked probing questions to a married German couple who were serving him his evening meal. "You're good people," Tracy declared, "but you must have been aware of what was going on." And to this, the wife replied, "We're little people. We don't get into politics. Hitler did some good things. He built the Autobahn. He gave more people work. But the other things, the things he did to the Jews and the rest, we knew nothing about that." And then the husband adds, "And if we did know, what could we do?" And right when Tracy took a deep breath to ponder the sincerity yet naivety of the couple's statement, ABC News interrupted the movie. It was an interruption that could have been orchestrated by the archangels due to its topic and its timing. Grainy camera footage captured horrific images in Selma, Alabama. Sheriff Jim Clark and his deputized Ku Klux Klansmen had savagely attacked an assembly of peaceful protesters on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. This protest was organized by young activists James Bevel, Diane Nash, and recently departed Congressman John Lewis. And this protest was populated by courageous Selma citizens like Amelia Boynton, people who decided that they would no longer remain silent in the face of evil and injustice, people who decided that they would no longer resign to second-class citizenship as a result of being denied the right to vote. People who, through the storm of segregation and the dark night of political disenfranchisement, declared, "We're sick and tired of being sick and tired." This is why these people, these courageous heroes, decided to march from Selma to Montgomery. They wanted to let the nation and the world know that the status quo was no longer sufficient. Unfortunately, their collective courage and justifiable claims of democracy were met with tear gas, billy clubs, and Jim Clark's own cattle prod. So on this day, a day that would go down in infamy in history as Bloody Sunday, the world was forced to witness how far a Southern state government would go to preserve and protect its exclusive claims to power. Maintaining a system that protected the privilege of some while denying the rights and humanities of others. That was their ultimate concern. Racial segregation and economic exploitation was the ground that constituted their very being. In other words, this is where defenders of an unjust system put their faith. They worshiped at the altars of segregation and racial hierarchy. In theological and religious studies circles, we would call this sort of behavior idolatry. Idolatry. It's the worship of another god. Idolatry, that which becomes the object of our heart's desire. Idolatry. In the words of 16th century reformer Martin Luther, that which our heart clings to and confides in. And it's what our Muslim brothers and sisters call shirk, an unforgivable crime of associating other things with the one holy God. Too many in our nation and world cling today to the gods of money and material. We live in a world where our political philosophies, economic orientations, and even our religious sensibilities are market-driven and profit-focused. We privilege profits over people. We privilege so-called security of our own perceived group over any social good or common cause. Relative values and ideals are granted the status of being sacred. And then we wonder why such obsessions render a society susceptible to fascism. For adherence to the gods of money and materialism, devotion to the deities of position and power, business, labor, and government work in collusion to concentrate power for the few at the expense of the many. The philosophy of Mohandas Gandhi taught that fascism, like all forms of injustice, emerges from fear. It's fear that ultimately impels nations, states, institutions, tribes, races, or religions to use any means necessary to secure their place at the top of the totem pole. This is what impelled the imperial West to enslave and colonize peoples throughout Asia and Africa. This is what catalyzes some to protest against equal opportunity for others. And this is what allows some to worship, in effect, their race or their gender or their ethnicity or their heterosexuality. Their fear forces them to willfully align with injustice, lest we lose the perceived protection of our presumed privilege. To cite my earlier example, it was the worship of one's Germanness that allowed some, like the couple in the movie, to ignore the injustices directed at the Jews in the mid-20th century. Just as that same worship of Germanness allows some to ignore the severe Islamophobia that's directed at the nearly 4 million Muslims living in Germany today. Similar can be said of many whites in Selma 50 years ago. As James Baldwin stated in his 1965 debate with William Buckley, it was the idol of race that consumed the white Southerner. Baldwin said something awful must have happened to a human being to be able to put a cattle prod against a woman's breast. What happened to the woman is ghastly. What happened to the man who does it is in some ways much worse. Or consider today the fear in the faces of young white men with tiki torches, Hawaiian shirts, and terror strapped to their body in the form of military weapons. They're marching on state houses to protest mask orders, attempting to terrorize peaceful protesters, and peddling their militant misogyny. The irony is that one suspects that while they reject masks in the name of public health, they adorn these masks to make believe that they're tough guys, to conceal their own male insecurity. But if they might only realize that the same structural forces that economically exploit women, the working class, and people of color are the same forces that contribute to their inferiority complex. Many of these young white brothers should be allies, not enemies. And this is what you and I must consider today. as the structures of injustice and inequality are exacerbated by a global pandemic, as the magnetic pull of an unjust autocratic system attracts the socially insecure and pulls the worst fears from inside of us. Who are we going to be? Are we going to be led by fear? Or are we going to be led by our faith? Will we have faith in a world that has value that cannot be monetized? Will we have faith in a humanity that cannot be reduced to narrow self-interest and sub-rational phobia? And are we going to be those who ask in fear, what can we do? We're just little people. Or will we be the ones who with faith will interrupt that narrative and disrupt the scene? Those who are willing to lay our resources, our bodies, and our faith on the line so that, in the words of the late, great John Lewis, when we see something that's not right, we say something. We find a way to get in the way. One love.